a stone chamber beneath a Templar commandery in southern France, where sunlight filters through a single high window to illuminate dancing motes of dust. A brother in a simple white habit bends over a copper alembic, watching droplets of clear liquid fall one by one into a glass vessel below. The rhythmic plink of each drop, the gentle heat from the charcoal furnace, and the fragrant steam rising from herbs suspended in boiling water create an atmosphere of profound focus and timeless patience. This is the laboratory of transformation, where matter is studied, purified, and elevated through processes that mirror the soul's journey toward divine understanding. Here, the mysteries of creation are explored not through scripture alone, but through careful observation of how God's materials respond to fire, water, and time. Welcome to Yawnworthy Jobs for Sleep, where we explore extraordinary occupations through calming stories designed to guide you gently toward rest. Tonight, we follow an alchemist brother through a full day's work in a Templar commandery laboratory during the year 1295, witnessing how medieval science, spiritual devotion, and careful craft combined in the pursuit of knowledge both material and divine. So settle into your bed, let your breathing slow to match the steady drip of the alembic. Perhaps adjust your pillow to find that perfect position, and allow this tale of patient transmutation and quiet study to carry you gently towards sleep. The morning of September 23rd, 1295, begins as most mornings do for Brother Arnaud, with the bells calling the commandery to lauds, while darkness still holds the world. The alchemist brother rises from his narrow bed in the dormitory wing, dresses in the white habit that marks him as a brother of the temple, and joins his fellow Templars in the chapel for the first prayers of the day. The stone chapel is cool in the pre-dawn hours, lit only by candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the brothers' voices blend in the ancient psalms that have marked Christian mornings for centuries. Brother Arnaud's lips form the familiar Latin words, but his mind, as often happens during these early devotions, contemplates the parallels between prayer and his work in the laboratory below. Both are acts of patient transformation. Both require faith that invisible processes are occurring, even when results are not immediately visible. After lauds comes a simple breakfast in the refectory, eaten in the customary silence that allows brothers to continue their interior prayers while nourishing their bodies. Bread, cheese, watered wine, the same fare that sustains knights and sergeants and all members of the commandery community. Brother Arnaud eats slowly, mindfully, aware that the day ahead will require both physical stamina and mental clarity. The work of transformation demands complete attention, and a distracted mind can mean wasted materials, failed experiments, or even danger from the volatile substances he handles. With breakfast complete and the morning light beginning to strengthen through the refectory windows, Brother Arnaud makes his way to his true workplace, the laboratory chamber accessed through a door in the commandery's lower level. Down a short flight of stone steps worn smooth by years of passage, the chamber itself occupies what was once a storage room, its thick walls and high ceiling now adapted to serve the needs of alchemical study. Small windows near the ceiling provide ventilation essential when working with sulfurous fumes and mercury vapors, while allowing enough light to supplement the oil lamps that burn throughout the day. The laboratory reveals itself gradually, as Brother Arnaud lights the lamps one by one, each flame pushing back the shadows to expose the tools and materials of his craft. A long wooden workbench runs along one wall, its surface scarred and stained from years of use. Upon it rest the instruments of transmutation, copper and glass alembics for distillation, clay crucibles for heating metals, iron tongs and ladles for handling hot materials, mortars and pestles in various sizes for grinding minerals and herbs, glass vessels of every conceivable shape for holding liquids and observing reactions, and scales of remarkable precision for measuring substances with accuracy. A furnace built of fire brick occupies one corner, its iron door already warm from coals that Brother Arnaud banked carefully before retiring last night. The art of maintaining proper heat represents one of the alchemist's most crucial skills. Too hot and substances burn or vaporize wastefully. Too cool and transformations fail to occur. Brother Arnaud has learned through years of practice to judge temperature by the color of the coals, the feel of heat radiating from the furnace walls, and the behavior of materials being processed. This morning, he adds fresh charcoal and uses bellows to coax the fire to greater life, watching as the coals shift from dull red to bright orange, listening to the soft roar as air feeds the flames. A small brown sparrow has made its home in the rafters of the laboratory, its nest tucked into a gap between stones where warmth from the furnace rises. The bird chirps a morning greeting, and Brother Arnaud acknowledges it with a smile. The sparrow has been his companion for several months now, seemingly undisturbed by the strange sights and smells of alchemical work, content to hunt spiders among the ceiling beams and occasionally hop down to investigate any crumbs Brother Arnaud might drop during his midday meal. The day's primary work continues a distillation that Brother Arnaud began 3 days ago, an attempt to extract the essential spirit from rosemary, creating a concentrated oil that holds the plant's medicinal properties in intensified form. The process requires patience above all else. The dried rosemary, harvested from the commandery's herb garden at the peak of summer and carefully preserved, has been placed in a copper alembic, with rainwater collected during the last new moon. The alembic sits atop the furnace, its bulbous bottom heated by the coals while its long, curved neck extends horizontally before curving downward, guiding the condensed vapors into a collection vessel. Brother Arnaud checks the setup carefully, ensuring all connections are properly sealed with a paste made from flour and egg white, preventing vapors from escaping before they can condense into the precious drops of essential oil. The collection vessel, a flask of clear glass imported at great expense from Venice, shows perhaps 2 fingers' depth of liquid, the accumulated result of 3 days of slow, steady distillation. The liquid itself appears almost colorless but carries an intense fragrance of rosemary, concentrated far beyond what the fresh or dried herb possesses. This essence, when complete, will serve multiple purposes within the commandery and beyond. Mixed with olive oil and beeswax, it creates a healing salve for wounds, particularly valuable for treating the injuries that knights and soldiers inevitably sustain. A few drops in wine can ease digestive complaints or dispel the heaviness that follows rich meals. Applied to the temples, it may relieve the headaches that plague Brother Matthew, the elderly librarian whose eyes have grown weak from decades of copying manuscripts. The alchemist brother's work thus serves practical ends, contributing to the health and comfort of the commandery community, while simultaneously advancing his understanding of how God's creation can be studied and utilized, while the rosemary distillation proceeds at its own patient pace, requiring only periodic checking to ensure proper heat maintenance. Brother Arnaud turns his attention to another ongoing project, the testing and purification of silver. The Templar Order's banking operations and extensive holdings generate a constant flow of coins, many of questionable purity, and it falls to individuals like Brother Arnaud to verify the quality of precious metals and, when necessary, refine them to higher standards. On the workbench sits a collection of silver coins recently arrived from a commandery in Spain, their payment for services rendered to a merchant making pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela. The coins bear various mints and monarchs, their silver content varying according to the honesty and skill of those who struck them. Brother Arnaud selects 3 coins of different appearance and places them in small clay crucibles, 1 coin per crucible, adding to each a carefully measured amount of lead, a substance that will help draw out impurities during the refining process. The crucibles go into the furnace, placed on a shelf of fire brick where they will experience intense but not excessive heat. The transformation of metals requires temperature control as precise as that needed for distillation, perhaps more so, since metals provide fewer visible cues about the processes occurring within them. Brother Arnaud has learned through long experience to judge the right moment for each stage of work, a knowledge that comes not from books alone, but from repeated observation and the development of intuition about how materials behave. While waiting for the silver to melt, Brother Arnaud turns to his manuscripts, a small collection of texts that guide his work and record his own observations. The most precious is a Latin translation of Arabic texts on chemistry obtained during the order's operations in the Holy Land, where Muslim scholars have preserved an extended knowledge from ancient Greek sources. The manuscript's pages, carefully copied by Brother Arnaud himself during his early years of study, detail methods for distilling various substances, techniques for testing metal purity, and theoretical frameworks for understanding how materials transform. Another text, this one written in a mixture of Latin and symbolic notation that only the initiated can fully understand, explores the spiritual dimensions of alchemical work. Its pages describe the nigredo, the blackening stage where materials are broken down and purified of gross impurities, compared to the dark night of the soul in spiritual development. The albedo, or whitening, represents the emergence of purified substance, clean and ready for the final transformation. The rubedo, the reddening, symbolizes the completion of the great work, the achievement of perfection in both material and spiritual realms. Brother Arnaud has meditated deeply on these concepts, seeing in his laboratory work a mirror of his own spiritual journey. Each distillation and purification an external reflection of the interior work all Christians are called to perform. A third manuscript contains Brother Arnaud's own careful notes, records of experiments, observations of how different materials behave under various conditions, and ideas for future investigations. This personal record grows steadily, each successful experiment adding to the store of knowledge, each failure teaching valuable lessons about what does not work. In the margins, Brother Arnaud has sketched diagrams of equipment, noted the phases of the moon during particularly successful distillations, for many believe lunar influences affect the outcomes of alchemical work, and recorded the precise measurements that led to desired results. The sparrow flutters down from the rafters to perch on the edge of the workbench, cocking its head to observe Brother Arnaud's writing with what appears to be genuine curiosity. The bird has grown remarkably tame, occasionally accepting crumbs from the alchemist's hand, and its presence provides a small connection to the natural world, even in this underground chamber of human craft and intention. Brother Arnaud checks the crucibles in the furnace and finds the silver has melted into silvery pools, the lead having fulfilled its purpose of drawing impurities to the surface where they form a dark scum. Using long iron tongs, he carefully removes the first crucible from the furnace and sets it on a fire brick surface to cool slightly. Then, with a practiced motion, he tilts the crucible to pour off the surface layer of impurities, leaving behind the purer silver below. The process is called cupellation, an ancient technique for refining precious metals, and Brother Arnaud performs it with the careful attention it deserves, aware that hasty work can mean the loss of valuable material, or, worse, injury from splashing molten metal. The purified silver, once cooled and solidified, will be compared to the original coins to calculate how much pure metal they contained, information valuable to the Templar treasurers who must account for the order's extensive financial operations. It will also be recorded in Brother Arnaud's notes, adding to the accumulated knowledge about the reliability of various mints and the typical purity of coins from different regions. This practical application of alchemical knowledge demonstrates how the art serves worldly needs, while simultaneously offering opportunities for deeper contemplation of transformation and refinement. As the morning progresses toward midday, the laboratory fills with the characteristic scents of alchemical work, the sharp tang of heated metals, the herbal sweetness of the rosemary distillation, the earthy smell of clay crucibles, and the slight sulfurous note that always seems to linger despite the ventilation. These aromas have become as familiar to Brother Arnaud as the incense in the chapel, markers of his particular vocation within the broader life of the commandery. The bells ring for sext, calling the community to midday prayers, and Brother Arnaud carefully banks the furnace to a lower heat, checks that all his vessels and equipment are safely positioned, and makes his way upstairs to join his brothers in the chapel. The transition from the focused solitude of the laboratory to the communal worship of the chapel requires a mental shift, a broadening of attention from the particular to the universal, from the manipulation of matter to the contemplation of spirit. Yet Brother Arnaud has come to see these as complementary rather than contradictory activities. Both seek understanding of God's creation, both require patience and devotion. Both transform the practitioner through their practice. After prayers comes the midday meal, more substantial than breakfast but still simple, a pottage of lentils and vegetables, bread and cheese. The refectory fills with the quiet sounds of eating and the occasional necessary communication spoken in low tones. Brother Arnaud sits with Brother Philippe, the commandery's infirmarian, and they discuss in quiet voices a patient suffering from a persistent cough that has not responded to standard remedies. Brother Arnaud suggests a preparation made from horehound and honey, perhaps with the addition of distilled essence of thyme if the respiratory congestion is severe. These consultations between the alchemist and the infirmarian happen regularly, the theoretical knowledge and practical skill of one complementing the direct patient care of the other. The afternoon's work begins with the preparation of a new batch of materials for future experiments. From locked cabinets along the laboratory wall, Brother Arnaud retrieves various substances, each stored according to its properties and the precautions it requires. Sulfur, arriving as bright yellow chunks from mines in Sicily, must be ground to powder for most applications. Brother Arnaud places pieces in a mortar and begins the rhythmic work of grinding with the pestle, the circular motion repeated hundreds of times until the crystalline chunks become fine powder of consistent texture. This grinding work, while physically simple, requires attention and care. The pestle must strike with consistent pressure, the circular motion must be smooth and regular, and the alchemist must periodically check the powder's fineness by rubbing a small amount between thumb and forefinger. Too coarse, and the sulfur will not mix properly with other materials. Too vigorous in grinding, and the friction might generate enough heat to cause the sulfur to ignite a dangerous outcome in a room containing many flammable substances. The grinding becomes meditative, the repetitive motion allowing Brother Arnaud's mind to contemplate larger questions while his hands perform their skilled work. He thinks about the nature of sulfur, one of the three primary principles of alchemy, along with mercury and salt. Sulfur represents the soul or spirit of substances, the combustible principle that gives them their active properties. Mercury represents the animating essence, the fluid principle of transformation. Salt represents the body, the stable foundation that remains after volatile elements have been driven off. All substances, according to alchemical theory, contain these three principles in varying proportions, and the alchemist's work involves manipulating these proportions to achieve desired transformations. Next comes the grinding of cinnabar, a brilliant red mineral containing mercury. This substance requires even greater care than sulfur, for mercury and its compounds can be hazardous if improperly handled. Brother Arnaud works slowly, wearing a cloth over his nose and mouth to avoid inhaling the fine dust, and stopping periodically to wash his hands in a basin of water kept specifically for this purpose. The ancient texts warn clearly about mercury's dangers, madness, tremors, and death await those who are careless with this powerful substance, yet they also emphasize its central importance in the alchemical art. For mercury represents transformation itself, the principle of change and fluid possibility. The ground cinnabar will be used in multiple ways. Heated in a closed vessel, it releases metallic mercury, which can then be used in various experiments, including attempts to dissolve gold, the first step in theoretical processes aimed at transmutation. Mixed with other substances and properly treated, cinnabar becomes vermilion, a pigment highly prized for illuminating manuscripts. And Brother Arnaud regularly supplies small quantities to the commandery's scriptorium, where brother scribes labor over religious texts and administrative records. With the grinding complete, Brother Arnaud returns his attention to the rosemary distillation, now entering its final stage. The liquid in the collection vessel has increased by perhaps another finger's width, and the scent rising from it has become almost overwhelmingly intense. The concentrated essence of hundreds of rosemary sprigs, distilled into this small volume of precious oil. Brother Arnaud judges that another hour or two should complete the extraction, after which the remaining plant material will be exhausted of its essential nature, fit only for composting in the commandery's gardens. While monitoring the distillation, Brother Arnaud begins a new project, the preparation of a tincture from wormwood, a bitter herb valued for its ability to strengthen digestion and expel intestinal parasites. The dried wormwood, gray-green and strongly aromatic, is placed in a glass vessel, along with spirits of wine, alcohol distilled from wine to a high concentration, itself the product of previous alchemical work. The herb will steep in the alcohol for several weeks, the spirits gradually extracting the active principles from the plant material, creating a tincture that can be administered in small doses mixed with water or wine. This process of extraction represents another fundamental alchemical operation, using the property of one substance, the alcohol, to draw out and concentrate the properties of another, the herb. It is gentler than distillation, requiring no heat, only time and the natural affinity between the dissolving medium and the dissolved substances. Brother Arnaud seals the vessel carefully and sets it on a shelf where it will remain undisturbed except for occasional gentle shaking to promote complete extraction. The afternoon light slanting through the high windows shifts and dims as clouds move across the sun, and Brother Arnaud lights additional oil lamps to maintain good working conditions. The laboratory, half above ground and half below, exists in a peculiar twilight, even during daytime, neither fully embracing natural light nor completely dependent on artificial illumination. This in-between state seems appropriate for a space dedicated to the study of transformation, the work occurring in a liminal zone between earth and air, darkness and light, matter and spirit. From another locked cabinet, Brother Arnaud retrieves a small quantity of gold, not coins, which would represent too much value for experimental use, but thin leaf gold used for gilding. The gold has come from a project by one of the commandery's artisans who was decorating a reliquary and had small amounts of excess material. In alchemical work, even tiny quantities of gold suffice for many purposes, since the goal is not to create large amounts of the metal, a fantasy of the greedy and ignorant, but to understand its nature and, in understanding, to glimpse divine principles of perfection and incorruptibility. Brother Arnaud places a piece of gold leaf in a small glass vessel and adds a few drops of mercury, watching as the mercury immediately attacks the gold, dissolving it to form an amalgam that destroys the gold's form while retaining its essential nature. This process, called killing the gold, represents the nigredo stage in microcosm, the breaking down of existing form, the dissolution of structure, the return to a more primitive state from which new possibilities might emerge. The amalgam appears dull and lifeless compared to the brilliant gold that went into it, yet alchemical theory holds that the gold is not destroyed but merely hidden, its perfection temporarily obscured. but capable of being revealed again through proper treatment. The sparrow, which has been quietly preening its feathers on a rafter beam, suddenly bursts into song, a surprisingly loud and melodious sound from such a small creature. Brother Arnaud pauses in his work to listen, appreciating this reminder that life and beauty persist even in spaces dedicated to the severe disciplines of study and experiment. The bird's song seems to fill the laboratory, echoing off stone walls and competing momentarily with the soft roar of the furnace and the gentle bubble of the distillation. As the afternoon wanes toward evening, Brother Arnaud completes the rosemary distillation, carefully removing the collection vessel once the last vapors have condensed and cooled. The final yield fills a small bottle of dark glass protection against light, which can degrade many essential oils over time, and represents perhaps 3 ounces of intensely concentrated essence, extracted from several pounds of dried herb. The cost in time, fuel, and materials might seem excessive for such a small return, but the potency of the product justifies the effort. Where dozens of sprigs of fresh rosemary might be needed to achieve a medicinal effect, a single drop of this essence can accomplish the same purpose. Brother Arnaud carefully labels the bottle with the contents, the date of completion, and notes about the distillation conditions, the phase of the moon, the weather during the process, and any unusual observations. These details might prove important later, either for replicating success or for understanding why future batches might differ in quality. The labeled bottle goes into a cabinet with other completed preparations, each one representing hours or even weeks of patient work. Each one a small victory of human skill and divine grace working together to unlock the secrets held within God's creation. The bells ring for vespers, calling the community to evening prayers, and Brother Arnaud once again makes the transition from laboratory to chapel, from the particular focus of his craft to the universal context of worship. The evening light streaming through the chapel windows paints the stone walls in shades of gold and amber, and the brothers' voices blend in the ancient psalms that mark the day's decline toward night. Brother Arnaud finds comfort in these rhythms, the way monastic life structures time through prayer and work, providing both framework and flexibility, demanding both discipline and creativity. After vespers comes supper, the last substantial meal of the day, followed by a brief period of free time before compline, the final prayers before sleep. Brother Arnaud uses this time to visit the infirmary, bringing the newly completed rosemary essence to Brother Philippe. The infirmarian accepts it, gratefully, immediately opening the bottle to assess the quality by scent. A trained nose can tell much about an essence's potency and purity. Brother Philippe nods approval, prays from one expert to another, and mentions that Brother Matthew's headaches have indeed worsened, making this arrival particularly timely. The 2 men discuss the proper dosage, 2 drops and a small amount of olive oil, to be rubbed gently on the temples, while the patient lies quietly in a darkened room. They consider whether additional treatments might complement the rosemary's effects, perhaps a tea of feverfew or willow bark taken internally. These consultations blend the formal knowledge both have gained from texts and teachers with the practical wisdom accumulated through years of treating actual patients, seeing what works and what fails, learning to adjust approaches based on individual needs and responses. Before returning to his chamber for the night, Brother Arnaud makes a final visit to the laboratory, checking that the furnace is properly banked to low heat enough to prevent the coals from dying completely, but not so much as to waste fuel or create unnecessary risk during the night hours. He inspects all the vessels and equipment, ensuring nothing is positioned where it might be knocked over, that no volatile substances are left uncovered, that the workspace is organized and safe. These evening checks represent not paranoia but prudence, the accumulated wisdom of practitioners who have learned that careful habits prevent disasters. The amalgam of gold and mercury sits in its vessel, dull gray under the lamplight, patiently waiting for whatever treatment Brother Arnaud will apply in his next attempts to understand and perhaps master the process of transmutation. The wormwood steeps silently in its alcohol bath, time and chemistry working their slow magic without need for human intervention. The ground sulfur and cinnabar rest in their containers, potential waiting to be actualized in future experiments. The laboratory holds all of this work in suspension, each project at its own stage, each representing a different aspect of the alchemical art. The sparrow has settled into its nest for the night, a small shape barely visible among the rafters, and Brother Arnaud wishes it silent good night before extinguishing the lamps, one by one. The last lamp leaves the laboratory in darkness, except for the dull red glow from the furnace's small viewing port, a single point of warmth and light in the stone chamber. Brother Arnaud climbs the stairs, emerging into the commandery's courtyard where the evening star shines brilliantly in the western sky, and torches flicker in their sconces along the walls. The bell rings for compline, the final prayers of the day, and the brothers gather once more in the chapel, their voices subdued now with the weariness that comes at day's end, yet still devoted, still faithful to the liturgy that structures their lives and connects them to centuries of Christian worship. Brother Arnaud prays the familiar words, his mind traveling back over the day's work, the successful completion of the rosemary distillation, the purification of the silver coins, the grinding of minerals, the killing of the gold and mercury, the preparation of the wormwood tincture. Each task completed, each small step forward in understanding, each contribution to the commandery's needs and the broader work of the order. In his narrow bed in the dormitory, Brother Arnaud lies awake for a time, his mind still active despite his body's fatigue. He thinks about the gold amalgam waiting in the laboratory, about the theoretical processes described in the Arabic texts that might possibly, theoretically, if God wills, lead to transformation of base metals into gold, not, Brother Arnaud has come to believe, through any magical or demonic power, but through understanding and working with the natural principles that God has embedded in creation. If God designed metals with certain properties and tendencies, then perhaps those properties can be manipulated through knowledge and skill to achieve effects that seem miraculous to the ignorant but are simply the flowering of natural law under expert guidance. Yet Brother Arnaud also questions whether such transformation, even if possible, would truly represent the great work that the alchemical texts describe. The physical production of gold from lead seems increasingly less important to him than the spiritual transformation represented by that physical process, the purification of the soul, the refinement of consciousness, the achievement of a state of being where human will aligns perfectly with divine will. The laboratory work, viewed from this perspective, becomes a form of prayer, a meditation on transformation expressed through material operations rather than words alone. Sleep comes gradually, taking Brother Arnaud down into dreams where alembics distill starlight into liquid wisdom, where gold grows like wheat in carefully tended fields, where the sparrow speaks in Latin about the secrets of flight, and where all the materials of creation dance in perfect harmony, their properties and transformations revealing the elegant mathematics of divine design. In these dreams, the boundary between physical and spiritual alchemy dissolves completely, and Brother Arnaud sees clearly what his waking mind can only glimpse, that all transformation is one transformation, that the refining of metals and the refining of souls follow the same fundamental patterns, that the laboratory and the chapel are not separate spaces but different expressions of the same sacred ground where humans engage with ultimate reality. The night passes quietly in the commandery, guards walking their rounds on the walls, most brothers sleeping, a few keeping prayer vigils in the chapel, and in the laboratory beneath, the banked furnace glowing softly, the steeping tinctures slowly extracting their essences, the amalgam of gold and mercury waiting patiently for morning and the continuation of work that has no true ending, only pauses between efforts. The sparrow sleeps in its nest, its small heart beating steadily, its body conserving warmth against the cool night air. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the commandery walls, the world continues its own transformations, seasons shifting imperceptibly toward winter, stars wheeling overhead in their eternal patterns, minerals forming in the deep earth through processes taking millions of years, the same divine creativity that Brother Arnaud studies in his laboratory operating at scales both infinitesimal and cosmic. When the bells ring for lauds to begin a new day, Brother Arnaud will rise and begin the cycle again. Prayer, work, prayer, work. The rhythm that defines monastic life and gives structure to the alchemist's quest for understanding. The rosemary essence will be administered to Brother Matthew's temples, perhaps bringing relief to his aching head. The purified silver will be weighed and recorded, adding to the order's financial knowledge. The wormwood will continue steeping, drawing ever more of the herb's bitter principles into the alcohol. The gold amalgam will be subjected to new treatments, heating or chemical additions, in the ongoing attempt to understand and perhaps master the processes of metallic transformation. And through it all, Brother Arnaud will continue his double pursuit, the outward work of practical alchemy serving the commandery's needs, and the inward work of spiritual alchemy serving his own soul's needs. The two paths intertwine and support each other, each illuminating the other, neither complete without its companion. In the grinding of minerals, he contemplates the grinding away of spiritual imperfections. In the distillation of essences, he meditates on the distillation of experience into wisdom. In the purification of metals, he considers the purification of intentions and desires. In the patient waiting for slow processes to complete, he practices the patience required for spiritual maturation. The seasons turn above the laboratory, winter bringing cold that makes the furnace's warmth more welcome, spring arriving with fresh herbs for the garden that will eventually find their way to Brother Arnaud's distillation vessels. Summer heat intensifying the challenge of maintaining precise temperatures, and autumn providing the harvest of materials that must be preserved and processed before frost claims them. Through all these cycles, the work continues with a rhythm that matches the liturgical calendar, the agricultural year, and the internal progression of experiments that sometimes span months or even years before yielding their conclusions. Brother Arnaud develops relationships with others beyond the commandery walls whose work intersects with his own. A Jewish physician in the nearest town, learned in Arabic medical texts, and experienced with compounds unknown to Christian practitioners, occasionally visits to exchange knowledge, a relationship tolerated by the commandery's leadership, because useful knowledge serves God regardless of its source. An elderly woman from a nearby village, wise in the traditional herb lore, passed down through generations of healers, sometimes brings unusual plants from the forest, receiving in return preparations that her own methods cannot produce. A traveling scholar, moving between monasteries and universities, stops for a night and spends hours in the laboratory discussing theories of matter and form, debating whether Aristotle's 4 elements truly explain all physical phenomena or whether the alchemical principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt provide better understanding. These exchanges enrich Brother Arnaud's work, preventing it from becoming isolated or stagnant, exposing him to ideas and techniques from diverse traditions. He learns from the Jewish physician about distillation methods perfected in the Islamic world, achieving greater purity and concentration than his previous techniques allowed. The village herb woman teaches him which plants gathered at specific times show enhanced properties, knowledge that complements his book learning with practical observation. The traveling scholar introduces him to new Latin translations of ancient Greek texts, philosophical frameworks that help organize and interpret his experimental observations. The laboratory itself evolves over the years, Brother Arnaud gradually improving and expanding his equipment as resources allow. A generous donation to the commandery provides funds for a larger alembic of superior design, its longer neck and improved condenser making distillations more efficient. A glass blower in Venice, hearing of the Templars' work through merchant networks, sends samples of new vessel designs, hoping to secure regular orders. A brother returning from the Holy Land brings back samples of minerals unavailable in France Realgar with its orange-red color, orpiment bright yellow, strange salts from desert regions that behave unlike any European materials. Each new tool, each new substance, opens possibilities for experiments that were previously impossible or impractical. Brother Arnaud methodically explores these possibilities, recording his observations with the same careful attention he brings to all his work. Some experiments confirm what texts have claimed, providing direct experience of phenomena previously known only through reading. Others contradict received wisdom, forcing Brother Arnaud to question whether the texts are wrong, whether he has misunderstood them, or whether his experimental conditions differ in some crucial way from those of earlier practitioners. One winter evening, working by lamplight while snow falls silently outside the high windows, Brother Arnaud achieves something he has pursued for 3 years, the successful distillation of a substance so pure and concentrated that a single drop placed on the tongue creates an almost overwhelming sensation of mint, more intense than chewing 100 fresh leaves. This achievement, the culmination of countless failed attempts and gradual refinements of technique, fills him with quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with pride and everything to do with the deep fulfillment that comes from mastering a difficult skill through persistent effort. He sits for a long time that evening, holding the small vial of mint essence, thinking about the journey that led to this moment, the early failures when his distillations produced only weak, contaminated oils, the breakthrough when he learned to control temperature more precisely, the discovery that certain herbs require different approaches than others, and the patient repetition of improved methods until they became second nature. This is the real great work, he reflects. Not some miraculous instant transformation, but the slow accumulation of understanding and skill, the gradual refinement of technique, the persistence through failure toward eventual success. The sparrow, grown older now, its plumage showing the wear of multiple seasons, watches from its customary rafter perch, and Brother Arnaud wonders if the bird somehow understands that tonight's work represents something special, or if it simply follows its own inscrutable avian purposes, happening to be present for this small human triumph. The bird has been his companion through all these years of work, its presence a constant through changing seasons and evolving experiments. And Brother Arnaud feels genuine affection for this small creature that shares his workplace. As the years accumulate, Brother Arnaud notices changes in himself, his hands growing more skilled, capable of manipulations that once seemed impossibly delicate. His nose becoming sensitive to subtle differences in odors that help identify substances and assess their quality. His vision learning to read the colors of heated metals and the clarity of distilled liquids with precision that rivals any instrument. But more than these physical changes, he notices a deepening of understanding that goes beyond technical knowledge, a kind of intuitive relationship with materials where he can often predict their behavior before testing confirms his expectations. This intuition, he comes to believe, represents the true goal of alchemical practice, not book knowledge memorized and mechanically applied, but a living understanding born from extended, intimate engagement with materials, a knowledge that exists as much in the body and heart as in the mind. The texts speak of this as developing the philosopher's eye, the ability to see into the nature of things, and Brother Arnaud recognizes that what seemed like mystical language when he was young actually describes a real capacity that develops through practice, patience, and attention. He thinks often about teaching, about how to transmit not just the technical procedures but this deeper understanding to younger brothers who show interest in alchemical work. He knows that procedures can be taught relatively quickly: how to set up a distillation, how to purify metals, how to grind and mix materials safely. But the philosopher's eye, the intuitive grasp of materials and processes, can only be developed through prolonged practice, through making mistakes and learning from them, through thousands of small observations that gradually build into comprehensive understanding. When a young brother named Thomas begins assisting in the laboratory, Brother Arnaud tries to teach both levels the technical procedures that allow work to proceed safely and effectively, and the deeper attention that might eventually lead to genuine understanding. He watches Thomas repeat procedures exactly as instructed, yet somehow produce inferior results, and he recognizes the gap between following instructions and truly comprehending what one is doing. Bridging this gap requires time, practice, and something else that Brother Arnaud struggles to name: perhaps faith, perhaps devotion, perhaps simply the willingness to attend carefully and persistently to materials and processes until they begin to reveal their natures. The commandery leadership changes over the years, new commanders arriving with different priorities, and Brother Arnaud must periodically justify his work to men who may not understand why a military religious order should support such obscure studies. He explains the practical applications, the medicines that keep brothers healthy, the metallurgical knowledge that ensures the order is not cheated in its financial transactions, the dyes and pigments that support the scriptorium. These justifications usually satisfy pragmatic commanders focused on tangible results, though Brother Arnaud knows they represent only part of the truth about why alchemical work matters. The deeper truth, which he rarely attempts to explain because it sounds too abstract or mystical for practical men, is that studying creation honors the Creator, that understanding the principles by which God structured the material world brings humans closer to divine wisdom, that the laboratory is as much a place of prayer as the chapel, and that the slow, patient work of transformation mirrors the spiritual journey all Christians are called to undertake. These truths Brother Arnaud guards quietly, living them through his work rather than proclaiming them in words that might be misunderstood or dismissed. Late in his life, when his hands have begun to shake slightly and his eyes require stronger light for close work, Brother Arnaud reflects on what he has accomplished and what remains forever beyond his reach. He has not achieved the transmutation of lead into gold, that legendary pinnacle of alchemical ambition, and has come to doubt whether such transformation is possible through human means, regardless of what ancient texts claim. But he has achieved something perhaps more valuable. He has learned to see deeply into the nature of materials, to work with them skillfully and respectfully, to serve his community with practical knowledge, and to find in laboratory work a path of spiritual development as valid as any other discipline. The sparrow is gone now, replaced by a descendant or perhaps an entirely different bird that has claimed the same nesting spot, and Brother Arnaud greets this new companion with the same quiet welcome he gave its predecessor. Life continues, generations succeed each other, but the work of transformation persists, each practitioner adding small contributions to an ongoing tradition that stretches backward into ancient history and forward into an unimaginable future. Brother Arnaud has played his part, as countless alchemists before him played theirs, and as others yet unborn will play theirs in times and places he cannot envision. As sleep approaches each night, Brother Arnaud lies in his narrow bed and reviews the day's work, offering it to God as his particular form of prayer and service, asking that whatever truth he has glimpsed might serve divine purposes, that whatever errors he has made might be forgiven, and that the work of transformation, both material and spiritual, might continue until all creation achieves the perfection for which it was designed, when the great work will be complete and all things will rest in the peace that passes understanding. The laboratory will remain his primary workplace for years to come, until age or reassignment takes him elsewhere. And throughout those years, he will continue adding to his notes, teaching occasional younger brothers who show aptitude for the work, consulting with infirmarians and treasurers and craftsmen who need his specialized knowledge, and pursuing his private investigations into the nature of matter and the possibilities of transformation. Some experiments will succeed beyond expectation, revealing new techniques or confirming ancient wisdom. Others will fail mysteriously despite following proven procedures, teaching the humility that comes from acknowledging the limits of human knowledge and control. Through success and failure, through the daily grind of routine work and the occasional excitement of genuine discovery, Brother Arnaud will maintain his devotion to both his craft and his faith, seeing them not as competing loyalties but as harmonious expressions of the same fundamental commitment to understand and work with the divine order that underlies all reality, to serve his community with his skills and knowledge, to seek truth wherever it may be found, whether in ancient manuscripts or personal experimentation, and to remember always that the true great work is not the production of physical gold, but the transformation of the human soul into something worthy of its divine origin. In destiny, the commandery itself will continue its larger work, managing properties, conducting banking operations, supporting pilgrims, maintaining military readiness, participating in the crusades when called upon, and serving as part of the vast network of Templar installations spanning from Scotland to Jerusalem. Within this larger context, Brother Arnaud's laboratory represents just one small node, one particular specialization among the many required for the order to function. Yet every node matters, every specialization contributes, and the alchemist's work, however obscure it might seem compared to the dramatic activities of fighting knights, forms an essential thread in the complex tapestry of Templar operations. The work of transformation continues, day after day, year after year. Medieval alchemists like Brother Arnaud slowly accumulating the knowledge and techniques that will eventually flower into modern chemistry, though they themselves would not live to see that distant fruition. They worked in faith, believing that their studies honored God by exploring creation's depths, that their practical preparations served human welfare, and that their spiritual contemplations brought them closer to divine understanding. Whether they were correct in all their theories, whether transmutation of metals was truly possible through the methods they employed, whether the spiritual meanings they found in physical processes were genuine insights or elaborate self-deception, these questions they could not definitively answer, and neither can we with complete certainty centuries later. What remains undeniable is the devotion they brought to their work, the patient attention they sustained through countless hours of repetitive operations, the courage they showed in handling dangerous substances with only primitive protective measures, and the faith that sustained them through failures and uncertainties. These qualities transcend the specific content of medieval alchemy to touch something universal in human experience: the desire to understand, the drive to serve, the hope that through patient effort and divine grace, transformation is possible, both in the materials we work with and in ourselves. Brother Arnaud would continue his work for many years in that commandery laboratory, his name perhaps recorded in administrative documents as the brother responsible for metal testing and medical preparations. His true accomplishments and inner life known only to God and to himself. His legacy embodied not in fame or recognition, but in the accumulated notes and techniques he would pass to successors, in the patience helped by his preparations, and in the small but genuine advances in practical knowledge he contributed to the slow, collective human project of understanding the material world we inhabit.